you'll see America's favorite sport on WHBQ television.
Talking Memphis Wrestling with Randy Hales and special guests.
Hello again, everybody. This is Rusty Robinson, and I'm not right along ringside. I am in Orange Beach, Alabama. It's been a beautiful day here in Orange Beach. We are having a few technical difficulties. Randy Hales, our regular host, is trying to get back signed on to the show, which is why you're now seeing me instead. So I'll do my best to fill in for a minute or two. As I mentioned, it's been a beautiful day at Orange Beach here, very warm. Our Orange Beach is very seasonal, and we are in the height of the season now. The beaches are packed, the town is packed. We actually went to New Orleans this weekend and saw our grandson, so that was good. And I'm going on a Bigfoot hunt later this week, so everything's good. So we're just hoping Randy can get back on with us pretty soon. He's got a great show planned. I already looked at the outline, and I had lots of questions to ask him about it, but I have not seen him yet. Our other hosts we're still waiting on also, including Pat Trammell and Michael St. John. And well, we can answer a few questions in the chat while we're waiting. Brad BC Collins says, hope the tomatoes are growing. The cherry tomatoes, or grape tomatoes, I guess they really are doing well. Our big tomatoes, full-size tomatoes, for some reason are not. And I can't figure out, what it is exactly. We tried fungicide. I actually got a whole new set of tomato plants and tried them, but they're just not growing for some reason. So they're not putting out fruit for some reason. I guess that's really the issue. So, we're still fiddling around with that. Some of the other stuff is growing good. We've got cucumbers on the vine. What else? We've been picking peppers for a long time. We've got both green bell peppers and hot peppers. May have to set up a pepper stand out on the street in Orange Beach to sell some of those. We've got so many. So, the garden's doing what gardens usually do. Some things grow, some things don't grow, and you just keep going until you figure out what it is that's doing it. Let's see who else is here. Frank Seaton's here, Calvin Lindsay. Calvin, Randy is having technical difficulties, and we're trying to get him back on the air. So I know he is very frustrated and is struggling with that. Adam's trying to help him right now. Plus, we're still waiting on Pat Trammell and Michael St. John to come join us here. So you're stuck with me for a few minutes. Let's see. Right now. Plus, we're still waiting on Pat Trammell and Michael St. John to come join us here. So you're stuck with me for a few minutes.
Hey, can you hear me, Rusty?
Yes, I hear you, Randy.
Pat Trammell and Memphis St. John to come join us here. So you're stuck with me for a few minutes.
Hey, can you hear me, Rusty?
Yes, I can hear you, Randy.
Let me interrupt right now as we have major disasters in Jonesboro. Little feedback because I'm hearing the audio from my phone. Completely disaster now, but let's bring in this makeshift show to Michael St. John. Michael, I'm having all kinds of trouble. I can't hear you, but I'll listen on my phone. So you talk now.
Well, I love you, Randy, and I'm sorry you're having those problems. I'm sure we'll get it fixed up, and it's good to see you. Other than the fact you're having problems, you look great. Hey, Doc, great seeing you as well. And it's great,
Michael.
Talking Memphis Wrestling, which we love to do. Are we going to go ahead with our first take? Is it cool to do that, Randy?
Yeah, I think so.
All right. So my first take is this, and Doc, you'll have fun with this one, I think.
Okay.
So today I'm listening to the news. And the news talks about, this big, beautiful budget bill that they're trying to pass and all that. It's all over the news, okay? So I get this information that the United States owes $60 trillion, and we're $60 trillion in debt. And I'm driving and I'm thinking, okay, I've never heard who we owe it to. So if we're all in debt for $60 quadrillion or whatever, who in the hell do we owe it to? Because you think about it, United States infrastructure, we build bridges, we build roads, we take taxpayer money, blah, 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 blah. We borrow money. Who do we borrow it from? Ourselves. So what do we got to show for
sir.
it? The Brooklyn Bridge, the Golden Gate Bridge, highways, interstates, everything all over. We don't owe nobody. We owe ourselves. We got to pay. What are you going to do? Cash out the Brooklyn Bridge? Oh, listen, let's just, okay, we the people of the United States, we're going to take over the Brooklyn Bridge. We already own it. Who in the blue hell do we owe? This is a shell game. So anyway, that's my first take. I'm going crazy. I can't figure out who we owe the money to.
Randy's on his soapbox tonight, or excuse me, Michael's on his soapbox tonight.
Hey, if Randy can't do it, Doc, I got to take over. What can I say?
Well, you're doing a good job. I guess the government sells bonds and stuff, in the name of the U.S. government. And I guess that's what they mean, or at least in part, although I don't really know either. I'm just kind of speculating. But you're right. I think they do just owe the country, owe the people in the country also. But I admit, I don't understand that completely.
I don't get it. And if we, the people, are supposed to be, getting back our money for this borrowing thing, just don't give me Houston. I'll take anything else. Don't give me Houston. I'm good with anything else. But no, when you think about it, I'm sorry, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I guess I am, but I'm not. How does this economic thing? I know the man that could probably explain it the best is Pat Trammell. He's a genius when it comes to economics and finances and things like that. And unfortunately, he's missing in action right now. But Shane makes a great point. As much as we've helped other countries, we shouldn't owe them anything, right? Because we've given them bajillions of dollars. When they say that, well, the United States is $60 trillion in debt and they're going to raise the debt ceiling. Well, who are we borrowing from? Us. What are we getting for it? Roads, buildings, bridges. Who knows what else? So I just really think it's a shell game. But you're talking to somebody that never understood freaking calculus either. So the only calculi I know anything is about the kidney stones that I've always passed or had surgery for. Now, those are calculi. But when it comes to calculus, I'm dead.
Well, I took calculus back in the day in college and never used it again after that. So I'm afraid I don't remember much of it now. Frank Seaton in the chat says, I think most of it is to China, and that could be true. I know the Chinese have invested in buying things in the United States, I know. So how that impacts the national debt, I'm not exactly sure. I'm not an economist by any means either. I'm, as I used to say on Star Trek, just a plain country doctor. That's me. So I don't know how this stuff works. At any rate, we will, I guess, continue to hear about that for the time being. I know the so-called Doge event or series of events, potentially saved a lot of money. And I think that mostly what they did was they found things that we probably didn't want to be spending money on, but the public didn't really know about it. And I know that happens. I spent a career in medical schools, and I can tell you academic enterprises do have sort of a thing going that most of the public doesn't understand and maybe would not appreciate. So I think that's part of the issue too. It's very easy to almost use that money that the schools get from the government in the form of grants as like a money laundering thing, because if you get it as a grant, then you can pay somebody else out of that grant to do something for you. And that's exactly what happened, for example, in the Wuhan thing, the Wuhan lab. So our Wuhan was a subcontractor of a grant holder in the United States. And I don't know who that was exactly, but they were contracted to do some work on viruses for that contractor. And, I think most of us think now that or the work they were doing was responsible for the release of the coronavirus. And then obviously it spread to the rest of the world. So I'm pretty sure that's how that happened. But, the way academics works, and Harvard obviously is in the news now, is just like that, in that they get the money and they can use it kind of for what they want to. Certainly you can, when you apply for a grant, you tell the granting agency, which could be the NIH or various other things. In my case, it was always the NCI. And you tell them what, in theory, what you're going to use the money for, but it can be pretty broad what you tell them you're using it for. You can tell them I'm going to use it to pay for my lab. I'm going to use it to find or pay employees. I can use it to subcontract. And most of those grants do not prohibit subcontracting out of the country, even, which seems a little odd. Federal money going out of the country to pay non-citizens to do work. So there's a lot of things, associated with that the public doesn't really understand and may not really appreciate.
Well, this is something I've wrestled with for a while, is that so much, and I know, I'm lucky, I'm fortunate, I know several members of Congress, a couple of senators, several governors, and the thing I've never been able to wrap my head around is somewhere after 1960, we lost our conscience and we allowed different items to be put in different bills that are passed in Congress for appropriations, for money. And so if there is a bill that's up to appropriate $50 million to the study of diabetes in children, there is a congressman in Missouri or there is a senator in Montana or something like that that will say, okay, well, I'm going to stick in an extra $10 million for the cattle farmers in central Montana because they need feed or whatever the case may be. It's still a medical bill for diabetes research, but there's all sorts of other crap in it that nobody knows about except people that write the bill. And in fact, even half the people that are in Congress that vote on it don't even know what's in it because they never read it. There's only 1 million bills a decade or a year or whatever. So they don't know what's in the bill. So it's just, I just get a feeling that it's all a work. And with that, let's talk wrestling.
Okay, sounds good to me.
Rare appearance here on the show here lately by me. So,
hi, Adam.
Hey, so I know you're aware, and Rusty, we were talking a little bit earlier as well. So we have some technical issues with Randy. We do have a video feed of Randy. We can hear Randy. Randy cannot hear anybody on the show. And so Randy is listening on via the feed, so he is behind. And I can see that he's talking. And so I want to real quick, I see Pat's here. And see, I didn't do that. Randy did that. So Randy, I think, is wanting to talk about the cards. And so I'm going to put Pat on real quick, just so Pat, we can say that you're here. I'm going to put the card down. That might piss Randy off, but I'm going to take the card down just for a second. So Pat, just to bring you up to speed, that's the issue that we're having at the moment. So I'm looking and I still see Randy's there. So what we may do is I may just put Randy on the screen and Randy may just be going without the ability to hear us, but we can maybe react to what he's saying and kind of go from there. So we'll see kind of how that goes. And I'm going to take the comments down just so the screen's a little bigger. But so when I join Randy now, just for everyone who's watching, we may be joining Randy kind of in progress on what he's talking about. And then we'll try to follow along, but I'm sure he's wanting to go along with the layout of the show that he's emailed to everybody. And we've got the news I know we want to cover with our truth and everything as well. So I'm going to bring up Randy and we'll see how that goes for a minute. And if we have issues with that, we'll drop back out of it and come back. But I just want to let everybody know what we're doing. And there's a chance we may go to Randy and he may not be saying anything at all. So I want to pop it up here and we'll see what happens. So I don't know if he's able to hear us or if he does hear us, it may be delayed. He is muted. I see that.
I can see Randy.
Yes, like I say, it's going to be delayed, so he's probably about 10, 15 seconds. I think I can hear my own voice through where he was listening to
Okay,
me.
what I want to do right now is
Yeah.
right now, Pat Trammell wants you to do your first take of the day. First take, Pat Trammell.
Well, my first take today, I've been traveling the roads of Alabama, and it gets more intense tomorrow. I'm coming up Michael St. John's Way to Boaz, Alabama, and then I'm turning right back around and driving to Pensacola, Florida. So I understand we had technical difficulties until I got here, and so I'm happy to be the solution to everybody's problem today.
Can I borrow you? Can I buy you a barbecue sandwich at Dale's in Boaz tomorrow?
You could, but I'm headed up there with 3 credit guys, and then I'm gonna turn around. So next trip, let me get the suits away from me.
Gotcha. Barbecue sauce wouldn't look good on suits.
No.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. You're going to be close to us here in Orange Beach if you're going to Pensacola.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, very good. We actually were on the road too today. We drove back from New Orleans to Orange Beach on the I-10, and there was an enormous crash at about the Mississippi-Alabama state line on the I-10, and they had to divert everybody for miles and miles back. And they had to switch to the U.S. Highway 90, which is to the south of I-10, and take that all the way back into Alabama before we could get back on. So it was a real mess for apparently like 4 or 5 hours on the I-10 today. So, and you can't predict that, obviously. So you just got to be ready for it in case it does happen.
There's not much east to west on the coast other than I-10 for sure.
Well, one thing is always helpful, and I've learned you trust it no matter what, is Waze. If you've got the Waze app, it'll tell you before you get into trouble to get. And so if you're driving on the road and all of a sudden it says take the next exit, it ain't Waze wanting to go to the bathroom. It's telling you to get out of trouble. So I always follow my Waze and, get around it. But I tell you, you're right about that. I've driven that stretch when Jamie was at LSU, driving that stretch down through there. And especially at night, it can get a long, long, lonely highway.
Yeah. In fact, we had that happen today. We were driving along, we had Waze on, and all of a sudden it tells us to get off in Godier, Mississippi, which we never go to. And we're going, what? Why is it telling us to do that? Did we mess it up somehow? So we turn it off, turn it back on, try sort of things. And then we catch up to the crowd, which is stopped at a dead stop, like a few miles beyond that. So then we realized what Waze was trying to tell us to do. So you're absolutely right about that. They know better than we do.
That they do. Somebody's brought up R-Truth, and I know we're probably jumping the gun here, but have I missed something? I have not been, unfortunately, I have not been tied into wrestling over the past few days.
Oh, he's been released by WWE.
Did they give a reason?
No, although there's something that I opened up right when I got here from Wrestling News. It's WZZ, and I don't know who that is, but it says R-Truth released by WWE, backstage details on his departure. And I was reading it, and it made the comment that what WWE made the decision without citing any misconduct or backstage issues, but apparently he was very popular backstage too, so I don't know.
Yeah, I know Randy and I were talking about that before the show, and I'm sure he'll want to get into it more in depth when we get to that part of the program. But yeah, he was let go, and I believe Carlito as well was let go. Yep. And I didn't see where it was anything performance related, but I did read an article somewhere that said something to the effect of it may have been, for both of those gentlemen, it may have been a Triple H decision for budget reasons. Is what I read.
That's odd. That's an odd reason.
Well, yeah. It's interesting you say that, Adam, and I'm going to find this, and I saw this on Twitter today.
I would think it might be a performance enhancement issue, or perhaps a failed drug problem issue.
Yeah, I had not heard that. I haven't seen any speculation of that.
The other question I have is, didn't R-Truth, wasn't he in Memphis at one time? I want to say he was.
He was. He was in Memphis during the time when Randy had Power Pro and Terry Golden had MCW during that developmental time. He did do a couple things on Channel 5. He wrestled then as K Crush, and he had quite a series of matches with Lawler, and K Crush actually won the title from Lawler during that time. And it's interesting too, I was reading an article where he said that he was going to leave wrestling during his time in Memphis. Road Dogg heard him rapping, and shortly thereafter, when you had Road Dogg and K Crush together on WWE television. With that being said, it looks like we have Randy now on his phone. So Randy, I'm going to drop the one where we have you on the computer, and let's see if you can hear us through the phone.
I can absolutely hear you through the phone. Man, I cannot believe it. Man, things can happen. I couldn't hear nothing. And we have good audience right now. Appreciate everybody. I'm Randy Hills, along with Adam Dunn, Pat Trammell, Michael St. John, and Dr. William Robinson, as we got big things happening today, a lot of cards to see. Now, I could not hear you at that point. We put up a card from Louisville, May 29th, 1972. Very interesting in the first couple of years of Jerry Jarrett running Louisville. I think it's very interesting that Wilbur Snyder, Baron von Raschke, and Bobby the Brain Heenan all on that card. And Adam, if you could put that card back up on the screen.
What's
and
the number on that one, Randy?
I didn't write the number down, but it's the very first one, and I'll put it up there right now. Well,
Yeah, that was it.
Okay.
So you guys
off screen and turn it back over to you guys.
You guys just discuss that. You might have already. Pat, we'll start with you. This is of course Louisville in 1972. Very interesting card for sure, if you can read it.
I can read it, and the most over guy ever in Louisville, there at the top, wrestling in the second or third matches. I saw, when I first read this, I saw the German Beards, and I thought, what tag team was that? Was that a mass team? But what I found out is it's Carl and Kurt von Bronner with Saul Weingroff, and their beards are at stake.
Yeah.
Versus Lynn Rossi and Tony Charles. And, I would like to have seen Lynn Rossi and Tony Charles work together. I bet that was a good tag team.
I would think that would be a bit of a different clash of styles because, Tony was off the ropes and a high flyer back in those days, what you would call a high flyer. And Lynn was a technical wrestler. He was, I don't know if I recall Lynn Rossi throwing a drop kick, but I'm sure he did. But he was a matician. And I found that to be an interesting card. To the note about Wilbur Snyder and who was it? The Bruiser? Who was it? I'm trying to see.
It was Wilbur Snyder and Jerry Jarrett against Baron von Raschke and Bobby Heenan.
I think at the time, this was in 72, and I think at the time the Indianapolis, and having listened to some of Cornette's podcast and then remembering I was in college in these days, I think the Indianapolis TV was being shown in Louisville at that time. So it may have been a concerted or partnership kind of effort, bringing in Wilbur Snyder and Baron von Raschke and Bobby the Brain Heenan. I guess that was before the Brain came. But it could have been something that was done in cooperation with the two groups.
Okay, Randy, if you can hear me real quick, I'm going to try something to where I believe I can put up the camera from your computer, and I'm going to bring in just the audio from your phone. So you should be able just to sit your phone down and continue using it, but I'll use the video feed from your camera. So if you give me just a second, I'm going to pull that up. So I got you there, and I'm going to hide the camera but keep the audio. So now, if just set the phone on the desk or whatever, and you should be fine to where we should still be able to hear you, and you should be able to still hear us. So can you still hear me, Randy?
I can still hear you. Yellow again, everybody. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay, yeah, then this should be the best experience then for you and the audience both. So I'll go ahead and drop back out, but this should work.
All right. So that card from Louisville, Kentucky. Let's go with you, William. The most interesting thing to me was Wilbur Snyder, Baron von Raschke, and Bobby Heenan. This was from 1972. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I was going to agree with Pat that that looks like an Indianapolis influence card. Jim Cornette has said that they could get TV from Indianapolis as well as from the Memphis promotion for several years. And so he could see guys like Bobby Heenan and Dick the Bruiser and Von Raschke and those guys. So I guess they put that together out of that, combination. I couldn't get Indianapolis wrestling. We couldn't get it in Memphis at that time. I've seen a few things since then from there. So I've seen Baron von Raschke, and of course everybody knows who Bobby Heenan was. He was just a genius, just brilliant. So that would have been a fun match, I think. Wilbur Snyder and Jerry, Jerry obviously was a genius in his own right, but against Baron von Raschke, who was another very good wrestler. And Bobby's wit and humor, and that would have been a good match, I would think.
Hey, Pat, what do you think about this Louisville, Kentucky card on Tuesday, July the 7th, 1970?
Well, as you look at it, it does look like a mixed card. And who was the promoter in Indianapolis?
Dick the Bruiser and Wilbur Snyder.
Bruiser and
Okay.
Snyder, yeah.
Okay, so they've come down here to work to put something together with Jerry, and I assume they didn't run Louisville regularly, ever.
Yes, they did.
They did.
They
okay.
ran it regularly and didn't draw crap. So it was dark for several years, and then Jerry Jarrett went and got the TV, got it on the air, and then a few weeks of running and being successful, Dick the Bruiser and Wilbur Snyder came up and confronted them and demanded a percentage of the town. That's what happened.
Okay. Well, I wonder how they worked that out.
Interesting that Jerry got TV on Channel 32, which was an upstart in Louisville. Of course, 3 and let's see, WHAS 11, Channel 3 Wave were the two biggies, and then they had 1U because Louisville was a sandwich market. You had 3 Bs in Cincinnati because you only had 3 networks back then: NBC, ABC, CBS. You had 3 Bs in Indianapolis. You had 3 Bs in Cincinnati. You had 3 Vs in Nashville. And the Vs get out further. So Louisville was sandwiched in. So they had 2 Vs. And then they finally, when UHF came to be, they put on Channel 27 and Channel 32. And this was on Channel 32, which right now does very well in the Louisville ratings. But back then was an upstart. I want to say Dick the Bruiser's show was on Wave 3. And I want to say it was a late night show, like an 11 or even a midnight show on a Saturday night.
Let me jump in here real quick. We have Wolfie D of PG-13. I had him scheduled as far as a part of the Pictures of the Day segment that he had posted, and it is a great picture. This is from 1995. This is PG-13's Wolfie D, who's watching this show today, with the great Lance Russell. Great picture that we're showing now, Wolfie D, and he said he grew up watching Lance Russell, and it was one of the thrills of his life. Now, folks, I'm having issues. I cannot hear anything, and so I might talk over them. They may talk over me, but we're doing the best we can. Michael, just how much do you know about that era of the early 70s in Louisville? Snyder and Bruiser running it, then they went away because it wasn't draw. Then they came back and did a power play and got a small piece of the town. Did you ever hear that?
Yes, I did. And in fact, I was in college then. In 72, I was a junior at Vanderbilt, and I had befriended a gentleman a year earlier who ended up being a commentator and a ring announcer, and genuine great guy, one of my mentors next to Scott Shannon, probably my next closest friend and mentor in Johnny Randolph. And I was going up to Louisville on Friday afternoon. I'd have my last class at 11 o'clock, leave Nashville at noon, would be in Randolph's office by 3 and sit there and learn the basics of programming a radio station, especially on the music side, from Johnny Randolph. And then we were both wrestling fans, and he got involved right away because he was running Wacky, WAKY 790 in Louisville, and it was the #1 station in town. And he befriended Christine Jarrett, and he and Miss Christine, in fact, he knew Christine before he knew Jerry. And then he was always a part of the inner sanctum up in Louisville. And when they got back on Channel 27 and got, Nashville wrestling back in Louisville, it was a different style. I'm like you, Doc, and Pat, I'm sure you've seen it too. I've seen several tapes on Dick the Bruiser's show, and it was sort of I don't want to say campy, but they're announcing a wrestler, and it was more of a campy wrestling show than portraying it as reality and feuds and programs and all of that. Like, the thing about Nick and Roy and Jerry, and of course Jerry learned from the bootstraps of his mama and Roy Welch, is Memphis was real. Nashville was real, and of course Louisville was getting this campy stuff out of Indianapolis, and that was sort of the Chicago style back then. So, when Memphis started up again, it doesn't surprise me at all. When Louisville started up again, because Louisville is sort of a redneck town. If you've ever spent any time in Louisville, and I've spent a lot of time in Louisville's a pretty redneck town. And the great thing about being a good old redneck town is those people love their wrestling. And there's also a very strong contingency of the urban population in Louisville who also love wrestling. And next to Birmingham, Pat, I think Bearcat Brown was more over in Louisville than any other city in the territory other than Birmingham.
Is that right? Okay. Most towns with water around them have that vibe. It's a river town.
It's a river town. True.
Yeah.
And Louisville was the first wrestling show I ever went to as a commentator where they served beer. And I'd actually been to a wrestling show in 1977 in Springfield, Massachusetts. We went up to a WWWF show. My ex-wife and I and my son Chris, who was 2 years old at the time, and we were in the loge area. And I'd wanted to always see San Martino, and he was on the card. And so we went up there, and it was a whole different wrestling crowd. It was a whole different wrestling style. And at the end of the match, Bruno was in a match, and he got screwed, and the guy got disqualified. I forget who he was wrestling at the time. It may have been Pat Patterson. And people started throwing beer bottles. So we ducked out of the exit and with our son in tow. And I'd never been in a sports arena that served beer in a bottle. But Louisville was the first town I ever went on a trip to do some announcing where, we taped and they were serving beer, not in a bottle, but they were serving beer.
Yeah, that's what New Orleans did. New Orleans always had beer available. There would have been a riot in New Orleans if there were not beer available, but they didn't sell them in bottles. And that's because you could drink on the streets in New Orleans. That was legal at the time. But you couldn't have a bottle or a glass on the street because the presumption was you'll get drunk and drop your glass and break it, and then you'll cut your footers. So they wouldn't allow you to drink in bottles, but you could drink out of, a paper cup or a can or something like that, and that was no problem. So they always had beer, both at the Municipal Auditorium in New Orleans, which was where they were at first, and this was the Mid-South Territory. I was going there. And then when they moved over to the Superdome, they continued that. So every event, like at the Superdome, they've always had beer for sale. Now, in fact, the Superdome has beer and cocktails for sale at virtually every event. So, it's funny how the places are all different.
Hey, beer and cocktails, I need some of those right now with the night that I'm having. So now I got to move my phone. I want to take a look at this second card May 73 in Atlanta. It's number 4051. 4051. That card. There's the card right now. I'll read it, then we'll send it to the panel and let me know, guys, if somebody else has notes besides me. The opening match, Lorenzo Parenti, Memphis guy against Mike Stallings, Cowboy Parker against Rocky Johnson, a six-man elimination tag team match, Jerry Lawler, Bob Orton, Don Kent against Bob Armstrong, Robert Fuller, and Jerry Briscoe. Ken Dillinger against Bob Backlund, Professor Tanaka and Harley Race against Dusty Rhodes and Mr. Wrestling #2, Abdullah the Butcher against the original Sheik, and the main event, Wrestling 1 Tim Woods against world champion Jack Briscoe, the first year that he was a champion in May 73. We'll start with Pat, then go William, then go Michael. Here's Pat about this Atlanta, Georgia card in May of 73.
I don't know when the war was, but this is as stacked a card as I've ever seen in Atlanta, Georgia. One thing I do want to mention, Randy put up a picture of Wolfie D, and Wolfie, who is a great guy, and I've always enjoyed visiting with him when we've been together. Wolfie has just ended his podcast. Live with Wolfie D, but it is after I think two or 3 years or maybe more, but it is fantastic wrestling history with fantastic guests, and it's still out there on the World Wide Web where you get your podcast, and I can highly recommend that, and I hope Wolfie will be with us soon. But getting back to that card, there's not anybody on there with the possible exception of maybe Ken Dillinger and a couple others that hadn't headlined all over the place. I mean, that is a packed card right there. The match I would love to see on that is either the 6-man or probably Tanaka and Race against Dusty and Mr. Wrestling 2. But look, Bob Backlund's on there. I mean, how many world champions are on there?
I counted 4 at least: Race, Rhodes, Backlund, and Jack Briscoe.
Yeah.
Well, you got to throw Lawler in there.
And Lawler. Yeah.
Okay, William, your thoughts on this card?
Yeah, the first one that I saw that I was drawn to was the Tanaka and Harley Race match, the tag match. Tanaka, Harley Race versus Dusty Rhodes and Mr. Wrestling 2. And Race versus Rhodes was just a great match by itself. So with Tanaka and Mr. Wrestling 2, Mr. Wrestling was more of a traditional mat guy, whereas Dusty, was more of a showman. And Harley he always came across as a tough guy. Everybody was afraid of Harley, even us watching in the audience. I didn't see Tanaka that much. So I don't know how to comment on him, but boy, that sure would have been the card or the match on that card that most interested me. Although I will say, I don't know that I ever saw Bob Backlund back in the day at that point. When he was the heavyweight champion of WWE, we didn't get WWE in Memphis. So we never saw, I didn't even know who he was at that time. So that was kind of interesting to me to see him there too, how he got into an NWA town. I don't know exactly. And that was 73. So that was before he became a world champion. So maybe he just moved around a lot in those days and was not exclusively WWE, I guess.
Well, I see something about Eddie Graham here, and anytime you get a packed card in the South that includes some WWF talent, it's through Eddie. I'm pretty sure of that.
Michael, your thoughts on this Atlanta card?
Pat just said what I was going to bring up, so that's actually excellent. You look at that card, and what a big different types of wrestling you have on this card. You have the mat generals like the Wrestling 2 and and Wrestling One, you have the Oriental style and Tora Tanaka. One of the earliest matches I remember watching in Nashville when Nick and Roy had Tora Tanaka and Mr. Moto as a tag team, and that was the Oriental style. And then you've got the crazy wild blood fest with Abdullah the Butcher and the Sheik. So you have all these different styles. But the thing that got me about this card, and it's in real small print, look at the managers. The manager of the Sheik was Eddie Creechman, and who was the Wizard, the Grand Wizard. And the manager of Abdullah the Butcher was Rock Hunter, who was a mainstay in Atlanta of Ray Gunkel's group. So this is NWA with Paul Jones's predecessor. This is a predecessor of Georgia Championship Wrestling. Paul Jones is involved, but also there's a little bit of the Gunkel thing involved here. So I think maybe this was at the beginning, before the war, if you would, Pat, of the beginning, where they were trying to work together and it just didn't work out. They had some New York people in, they had some Florida people in, but this is a hodgepodge of styles of matches.
Is that Luthez, the picture?
That's what I thought too, but I think it's Lorenzo Parenti.
Okay.
I think it's Lorenzo Parenti.
Okay.
Who was Mephisto and Dante, isn't that right? Or were they the Blue Infernos, Randy? Lorenzo Parenti and Pepe Lopez. Or yeah, were they the Blue Infernos or Mephisto and Dante?
No, I think they were the Blue Infernos. I think so. Now, quick question to everybody. Does anybody in the panel have notes printed off?
I have them in front of me, but I don't have them printed
I have them
off.
on a computer.
I've got it.
Oh, okay. So the next card we are going to look at is number 4050. This is Miami Beach, May 1973. And if you would, William, I'm going to have you read that card.
Sure, you caught me with my mouth full for a second. But Miami Beach.
Let's go ahead and put that card up there, and I guess I need to find it.
Okay. So Miami Beach, May 1973, and the matches listed are Frank Hester, versus Frank Martinez, so Battle of the Franks. Then Tony Charles again with Roberto, and I'm not sure who Roberto was, versus Koiashi and Yoshisara. Then Johnny Valentine versus Hiro Matsuda. Hiro Matsuda had been in Florida for a long time, as I recall. Then Eddie Graham, who was the sort of the chief of Florida for a long time, booker, trainer, all those things, with Tim Woods. And Tim was Mr. Wrestling, as I recall, at some point. And Paul Jones versus Buddy Colt, Chris Markoff, and Dick Murdoch, of all people, who was from the Texas Panhandle, who I actually met when I lived in Amarillo before Dick died of a heart attack. And then the world title match, Harley Race versus Ron Fuller. And I thought I'd seen Harley Race versus Ron Fuller maybe in Tennessee at some point. So it's kind of interesting seeing them in a title match in Miami Beach also.
Pat?
Well, there's some interesting cards on there for sure. And I noticed down at the bottom, I'd like to know who El Psychedelico would be in one of the undercard matches. Anyway, obviously that is a Florida card with Mike Graham and Kevin Sullivan tag teaming. I don't know how Dick Murdoch got down there either without Dusty there, because that was, Dusty split up with Murdoch to go to Florida. That is, when I first saw Harley Race and Ron Fuller, I didn't know if that was a young Harley or a young Ron, but I think that's a young Ron.
Yes, it's Ron Fuller. Michael, your comment from Miami.
Boy, I'll tell you that you mentioned Togo and Soto were a tag team together, but they're wrestling in separate matches in this. Buddy Colt was a tremendous worker. And of course, he was in the plane crash, and but a tremendous worker. I'm not familiar with Chris Markov. I know that there were several quote unquote Russian wrestlers that were about featured in that time, but Dale Lewis, you talk about a great grappler there. Kevin Sullivan and Kevin Sullivan and Mike Graham had to be very young at the time, but what a tag team, what a duo that would be. Gorgeous George Jr., I worked with him a couple of times. He was playing off of an old gimmick, but I'm not so sure he was as good or talented as a wrestler as George's George was.
Interesting card there, and the next card we'll go to is 1975, May 27th, 4046. And if you have that card, if you could read that, Rusty. Then we'll go with that, then Michael.
Okay, this is Louisville, May 27th, 1975, I believe, 4046. So the matches I have listed here include Jerry Jarrett versus Pete Austin, Mr. Wrestling, it doesn't say whether it's 1 or 2, versus Bill Costello, The Sheik versus Luke Graham, crazy Luke Graham, and he was crazy. The Stomper with Bearcat Wright versus Phil Hickerson. That would have been a good one. I don't think I ever saw that match before, Stomper and Hickerson. And then Barnes and Dundee, the original tag team that Bill Dundee, our original tag partner that Dundee came over with from Australia to the United States, versus Tojo Yamamoto and Jimmy Kemp, who were
Jimmy Gold.
Yes. Yeah, that's what I knew who you were talking about. I didn't think of it in time. 2 regular guys on the Tennessee circuit. So yeah, that's another interesting card. I think what stood out to me was that Stomper versus Phil Hickerson match. That could have been
absolutely. I'd love to have seen that.
Yeah, that would have been pretty brutal.
Yeah.
Pat, I'm sure your feelings are hurt because your hero Jerry Jarrett's in the opening damn match.
Well, he was busy counting the gate and then left town, I guess. Randy, what Mr. Wrestling was that?
I think at that time it would have been Dick Steinborn.
Okay. Yeah, I mean that's I guess how long did it take Dundee and Barnes? I mean, I guess they got over as soon as they hit the shore, right? Because George didn't stay that long, did he?
No, they got over, and what got them over was they came in and got a win on TV. The following Monday, they beat Tojo Yamamoto and Eddie Marlin for the Southern Tag Team titles, and within 3 weeks, and Lawler was banished at this time. Your good friend Jerry Jarrett fired the biggest star in the history of Memphis Wrestling anyway. He then got over Barnes and Dundee because then they proceeded to sell out. So yeah, that's the time period there.
Dinner time, grow up.
Thank you.
All right, Michael.
Nope.
Bill Costello was the guy that got shot on the streets of Nashville, outside of a bar at the Sam Davis Hotel on Commerce Street. So that's a little backstory on that. I think you're absolutely right, Randy. Mr. Wrestling was Dickie Steinberg, born back in that era. I agree with you on the Stomper. I'm a little perplexed that Bearcat Wright, who was a star on his own, was seconding the Stomper in Louisville. And I'm wondering if at this point in time that the Stomper might have been working for Dick the Bruiser out of Indianapolis, and that was how the Bearcat Wright integration into that match became. But odd combination of Tojo Yamamoto and Jimmy Golden. Who'd have thunk it?
Yeah.
Very interesting card, and Louisville was hot at that time. There's no doubt about it. Now, I want to explain this May 28, 1979 card before Rusty reads it. It is 4047, Adam, 4047 from Memphis. This is the, and you know what? I skipped the damn card, and I apologize for that. We're going backtrack to Memphis, May 1974, 4045, Adam. 4045. We'll get to that. This is Memphis at the Mid-South Coliseum, did over 11,000 people. This is on the run from May to September, the most attended piece of time period in the history of Memphis wrestling. This got it going with Lawler and Ricky Gibson, and we'll have Rusty read this card, then go to Michael, then go to Pat. Rusty, read this Mid-South Coliseum 1974 card, please.
Oh, you bet. And I think I was at least at some of those matches in 74, the summer of 74, where the crowds were so big, but I can't remember whether this one was one of them or not. At any rate, Memphis in May of 74, Joey Rossi versus Melvin Kimball. I don't remember Melvin Kimball. And then Lou Thez, multi-time world champion versus Pepe Lopez, who was, a veteran at that time. Tommy Gilbert, who was a big star in Memphis for years, versus the Red Shadow. Then Steve Kovac versus Ronnie Blastein. And again, that's another guy. I don't remember Ronnie. Eddie Marlin versus Al Green, two Memphis regulars. Obviously, I love the Don and Al Green. Then the Infernos versus Bearcat Brown and Bobo Brazil. And then finally, Lawler versus Rick Gibson, which reminded me, that Rick Gibson, the brother, of Robert Gibson, was a big deal. He was a star in Memphis, more so than Robert for a number of years. And I think, didn't Rick have a car accident or something happened to him that he kind of backed out of, became much less of a star in wrestling. But at the time, Rick was a headliner in Memphis, and this reminded me of that.
Michael?
I'm wondering if this card was part of the Memphis in May celebration that they used to have out at the fairgrounds. It has smackings of that for some reason. A very interesting card. Lou Thez this may have been the period of time where Lou was on his, Lou's gone through all his money and was taking whatever booking he could, and that may have been why that match came about. Interesting that Eddie Marlin had Tommy Gilbert in his corner, Al Green with Sam Bass in his corner. But this is the funny thing that struck me. It's a mask versus hair match for the tag team. The Infernos, managed by J.C. Dykes, against Bearcat Brown and Bobo Brazil. I sort of lost what the gimmick's all about because Bearcat Wright and Bobo Brazil were both bald. So whose hair got cut? So I just find that to be odd.
Bearcat Brown was bald.
Yes, well, when I met him, yeah, he was bald. He had the little St. Anthony thing going around the head, but
like I have.
I'm getting there, but yeah, and Bobo had the little curly thing going around the ears, but that was about it. If they could have had a shaved head match and it wouldn't have done any good.
Bobo was somebody they brought into Atlanta in the early days as an enforcer. He's one of those, was going to come back and fix everything. I have never, truthfully, I have never heard of Steve Kovac or Ronnie Blastein.
Steve Kovac was from Canada. He came down with a guy named Bob Ramstead for Nick and Roy, and they were a really good tag team that took to the fans right away. Bob Ramstead got into some trouble and left town, and Kovac started. He had a brother that came in, or somebody they posed as a brother, Sandor and Steve Kovac. And if you look at some of the matches up in Minneapolis, Chicago, and that northern tier of territories, they were always on those cards because they were from southern Canada.
Now, somebody has put on here, no contest here, but they've got, is this the winners, I guess? So I guess the Infernos ran away before they got their masks taken off.
It lists Bearcat Brown and Bobo Brazil, and they might have had to unmask. I just don't know that. I don't remember 74. I was 13 years old and wouldn't go to Memphis.
Randy, wasn't the Infernos? Is that the Blue Infernos or different tag team? Because the Blue Infernos were Lorenzo Parenti and Pepe Lopez, right?
Yeah, and I forgot which group this is, but it was just the regular Infernos managed by J.C. Dykes.
Yeah, I think that was a different group from the Blue Infernos, but I can't remember what their names were.
I think that's right too.
Pat, what do you think of this this card?
Yeah, it's got some interesting folks on it. I mean, and you know, I think we have all we have all missed something by Ricky Gibson's unfortunate car accident at that stage in his career. Because my understanding was, and I've seen a little bit of tape on him, is he was a outstanding worker and had a very very long way to go. And it was interesting to me too, Michael, to hear what you say about Luthez, because I had kind of heard that too. But I mean, he had kind of worn out his welcome with everybody in the country, didn't it? Because he was so demanding when he was over.
Well, that's true, and a lot of the young boys didn't like to work with him because he was an old
I mean, he was
stretch
stiff,
guy.
right?
Yeah, he was a stretch guy. I mean, he was a
70 years old, stretching people.
exactly. He was an old pacer grip. He put him through the paces, and a lot of young guys just did not like to work with Luthez.
Yeah.
Don't shake his hand.
Now, the lucky numbers in the program, was that for, I wonder what was given away there.
A free ticket to the next week's card.
Okay.
Of course.
Okay.
Get them back in the building to buy other programs and other pictures. No doubt about it. We'll go to 4047 right now, 4047. This is Memphis, May 28th, 1979. The interesting thing about this, a few months before this, or maybe four, Robert Fuller was brought in by Jerry Jarrett and Buddy Fuller to book the territory, and Robert had just come off a wonderful booking run in Knoxville for Southeastern Wrestling. His stuff didn't work in Memphis, but this card, May 28th, 1979, this is the finals of the van tournament to win a brand new van. Robert puts this for weeks. It did not draw. Again, did not draw, and this cost him the booking job. And we'll have you read that card, but I will say that in the Robert Fuller era, Tommy Gilbert Jr. was Eddie Gilbert. I've mentioned that before. Soon as Fuller was fired, Jerry Jarrett started using Tommy Gilbert Jr. under his name that everybody knew, and that would be Eddie Gilbert. So Tommy Gilbert Jr., Eddie Gilbert against Big Outlaw Ron Bass, the opening match, and then if you could finish up this card, William.
Sure. So May 28th, 1979, I'm pretty sure I was at this one because that was certainly in the Coliseum then. So Tommy Gilbert Jr. or Eddie Gilbert, and I remember seeing a very young Eddie Gilbert. Boy, he had such a baby face at the time. You would have sworn he was like 14, 15 years old. Versus, and I guess it was particularly struck because it was versus Outlaw Ron Bass, who really looked like a badass guy from Texas. So that was an interesting one. Rick Oliver versus Jerry Bryant. Jerry was sort of a perennial job guy, to use that word, in Memphis. So he was getting a chance to be on the big card in the Coliseum on a Monday night. Then Tommy Gilbert versus Larry Latham, and both of those guys were stars in Memphis. Larry Latham went on to tag with Wayne Ferris in the original Tupelo. What did we call that? The Tupelo's fight, I guess.
Concession brawl.
That's it. Concession stand brawl. And then Tony Charles versus Mr. Fuji. And I didn't remember Mr. Fuji being in Memphis, but I'm sure, I guess it happened. Dick Slater versus Professor Tanaka. Robert Fuller versus Wayne Ferris. So Ron was booking, but Robert was wrestling at that time, I guess.
No, Robert was booking.
Robert was booking.
Okay. I misunderstood that then. Okay. Thunderbolt Patterson, who I love Thunderbolt. Well, he was so good. The black crowd was so into Thunderbolt. He had those great lines, and
I was so into Thunderbolt.
Oh yeah, me too.
Well, gentlemen, it bees that way sometimes.
You
That's
got to
where Bruno.
call
That's where Bruno
somebody.
got it from.
Yeah, you got to call somebody. Let somebody know. Oh, he was so good. And against Gorgeous George Jr. And then Dundee versus Boris Malenko. Lawler versus the Stomper with LeDuc. Yeah, I remember that now, the Stomper being with LeDuc. So I'm pretty sure I was at this one. Semifinal, Robert Overslater and the Stomper over, it's a Stomper over Gilbert. Huh. Okay. I don't know that I understand that. Fuller over Stomper. Oh, that was the tournament to get the car, the automobile. So, that was a big card for Memphis at the time too. So I'm pretty sure I was there for that. And I remember Thunderbolt being the outstanding attraction that night. He actually upstaged, as I recall, Lawler, which was really unusual in Memphis. There are not many people who could upstage Lawler in that town at that time.
Randy, I don't know obviously the whole story or anything about, and I know it's not just a card on a Monday night to draw money on Monday night. I mean, it's TV, it's everything else, but that's a really good card in my opinion. I'd pay to watch that for sure.
Well, not enough people paid to see it. That's where Robert Fuller kept his job. He was
Yeah.
fired because of this card.
Real, if this is the card,
Yes, this is the card.
what did they draw?
Today we'd give anything for it. It did $4,000, 4,000 people. Back then, that was horrible.
Yeah, no, that's a good card in my
Yes.
opinion.
Randy,
But you don't know how he built it.
Right.
Randy, I have a question, and this is from a running the matches sort of standpoint. How in the blue hell do you get 15 matches in a 3-hour show?
First of all, you notice where it started at 7:30 instead of 8 o'clock.
Mm.
Yeah, so they started a half hour early. Okay.
And I would imagine Tommy Gilbert Jr. and Ron Bass went probably 2 minutes.
Yep.
Rick Oliver, Jerry Bryant, 2 minutes. I would say Tommy Gilbert, Larry Latham, 6 or 7. Tony Charles and Fuji, 5 or 6. Slater, Tanaka, 5 or 6. Robert Fuller would get time with Wayne Ferris. Thunderbolt and Gorgeous George, couple of minutes. Dick Slater against Dundee, probably 15 or 20. Lawler, Stomper, got time there. They wouldn't. I bet it was over by 10:30.
And wasn't there a hard? And it was when I was programming WMPS. There was a curfew of some kind. I remember in Memphis that events had to be over by 11 o'clock. Do you remember that?
Yes. Yeah. And I don't remember whether that was a police curfew or whether it was just a Coliseum or what it was. And the other thing they were always trying to do, if this was, 79, they had already moved over to Channel 5 or WMC. They always tried to get through the matches in time for them to announce the results of the matches on Monday night at the 10 o'clock news. So you would hear the results of the matches like at 10:27 or something like that on the 10 o'clock news.
Guys, I'm not a mathematician, although I do have an accounting degree. I count 9 matches there, not 15.
The other 6 were the elimination matches for the vehicle.
Yeah, the tournament.
Okay, got it.
Is that card interesting to everybody? I think everybody agrees.
Yeah.
That is a real good card.
Yeah.
I think it would pull in this day and time. I mean, I think it would pull more. I think it would pull more money than it pulled in today's atmosphere of wrestling. I mean, look at all the people. Look at all the headliners that are on that card.
Here's the thing that I think my theory is, Michael, I think you'll agree. Tennessee wrestling up in East Tennessee is a lot different than what Memphis was used to. Even though a lot of the talent had drawn money in Memphis. Robert Fuller booked like he would have booked in East Tennessee. It was different than what Jerry Jarrett had booked 10 years before, and the people just didn't buy East Tennessee wrestling in Memphis. That's my theory.
I think you're absolutely right, Randy. And I think if Bo James is on our crew with our crew this tonight, I think he would agree. Even to this day, there is a big difference between East Tennessee, Middle Tennessee, West Tennessee. Middle Tennessee, West Tennessee are more of the same genre, but boy, you get east of east of I-75, and you get into those mountains, and you start getting into those very rural areas. That's a whole different mindset. Everybody's last name is Ogle or Trotter. I mean, it's amazing how many, and wrestling up there. I have actually been to a couple of the shows in Knoxville, and by the way, Randy, to your point, Chattanooga is a whole lot different than Knoxville. Chattanooga is more Nashville in this area than Chattanooga is it's not akin to East Tennessee. But again, to Pat's point from earlier, a river town. But East Tennessee is I've been to football games in Knoxville with 102,000 people and no set of teeth. So no full set of teeth. So, it's weird.
We're going to break away from a regular scheduled program. We'll get back to the couple of cards, maybe just one more that we have coming up. I had mentioned earlier, I don't know who was on the show, but Bo James sent me a message before we went on the air that one of his best friends, former independent wrestler, his real name is Seymour Ray from East Tennessee, and he was a principal up there in Kingsport, Tennessee. Very nice guy, was an independent professional wrestler, was a champion for Bo James Southern State Wrestling. I'm sure the panel support me and agree with me. And Ray and Bo, this show today is dedicated to Seymour Ray Idol, dedicated to him today, and our prayers are to you. Certainly. Pat, you agree?
I absolutely agree. I heard that this morning, and that's the good ones are leaving us too soon. And I reached out to Bo on social media about it, and it's just a sad thing. Your relationships with your wrestling people are unique to any other relationships you have, and I know that I mean that for the three of y'all and Adam and Chris. But you ride, and Randy, you know this better than anybody. You ride roads with people for years and years in the middle of the night, and you talk and you get to know each other, and those are relationships that don't leave you. So our Bo says he'll be doing the eulogy, and I know he'll do a absolute fantastic job. And our thoughts and prayers are with you, Bo, and his family and everybody that loved him.
Michael?
I've actually seen. I did not know Ray, but I have seen some of his work on Bo's YouTube channel and some of his videos. And the guy could work, and he carried the belt with pride. And I echo what Pat said. And Pat, I read what you had put on social media earlier, and of course liked it. Pat is very poignant when it comes to replies in these situations, and I echo your sentiments. But I think you hit the nail on the head. And Doc, I know from being a fan of the business, there is a very unique relationship among wrestlers and people that are within the wrestling squared circle, if you would. And the one thing about it is, I remember, and I always loved this about wrestling, wherever you were. I would go back in the back in Phoenix or in Dallas at the Sportatorium, in St. Louis at the Keel or whatever. But when the boys recognized that you were part of the wrestling family, and I don't know if it's like that anymore. I really don't. The last wrestling show I went backstage was a AEW show here in Huntsville, and it was a million times different. I went back to see Jeff Jarrett, and it was a million times different than I'd ever experienced in my life. But there was always that sense of family and camaraderie. And if you think about it, anytime anybody was in need in those dressing rooms, and Randy, I think you could back me up on this, the boys all came together to help somebody that was down on their luck, or if they had a broken down car, or they always came. There was always, I always thought of it as the heart of the dressing room. There was a heart in every wrestling dressing room. I don't know if that's the case in this day and time, but back then in the territory days, I think that was certainly the case.
Absolutely, and we appreciate everybody talking and giving support to our friend. Now, Dr. Robinson has a podcast. It will release tonight at midnight. It's called The Blues Doctor Recommends. He talks medicine, he talks wrestling, he talks life, he talks music, he talks a lot of things. And we're going to have our version of talking a little music now. And I'm going to give you a few words of a song that is just fitting for our Talking Memphis Wrestling today, considering the date we're doing it. Michael, we'll start with you as I read the first verse of this song, and you tell me a song that I listen to on this date every year and have for probably 20 years. And it goes like this. Was the 3rd of June, another sleepy, dusty Delta day. I was out shopping cotton, and my brother
was
baling
baling hay.
And at dinner time, we stopped and walked back to the house to eat. Michael, what's the name of this song, and what does this song mean to Michael St. John?
Well, first of all, the question of the century back in those days was what was being thrown off the Tallahatchie Bridge. And that is the Ode to Billy Joe by a very beautiful Mississippi woman, Mississippi true and true. I had the honor of meeting her and actually having dinner with her. And she was a looker in her own rights, but a wonderful singer and a wonderful songwriter. And had another song out called Fancy, and I'm talking about Bobby Gentry. And of course, Reba McEntire had a remake of Fancy, and it went to #1 on the country charts in the 80s. But Bobby Gentry and was on Capitol Records, the same record label the Beatles were on, and it was called the Ode to Billy Joe.
Yeah, and she wrote that song herself when she was younger. Yeah, I don't know if it was necessarily about actual events, but sort of a combination of things. And the other thing about Bobby Gentry that I was going to point out, not only was she a great singer, great songwriter, and beautiful woman, she also was an accomplished guitarist. She played the guitar herself during the performances of Ode to Billy Joe, which is not an easy part to play. So between singing that and playing that guitar part at the same time, that's an accomplishment for sure.
What part of, I know she was from northern Mississippi. Was she from, was it Senatobia or Philadelphia, Mississippi? I know she was in that area.
Yeah, it wasn't Philadelphia because that's more South Central. It might well have been Senatobia because it would have had to have been, somewhere near where the Tallahatchie River crossed. I think it was 49, I believe.
Or 43, maybe?
Maybe.
45.
Now I'm not sure. But that sounds right.
She lived the remainder of her life in Eads, Tennessee, up north of Memphis. She lived next to a friend of mine, a banker, named Frank Cinciola. And I met her.
What does the song mean to you, Pat?
I was a kid, and I remember that song. In my life, songs remind me of places. And there's a catfish restaurant on the St. Clair County, Talladega County line called the Ark that's been there since the 20s. And they had the old booths and the wood tables. And I remember, when did that song come out?
1967, 68.
Okay, I was 4 or 5 years old, and I remember hearing that in the Ark because they had those little, those small jukeboxes in the table, in the booths that they used to have.
It's funny you mentioned that, Pat, because the record was broke. The radio station that took it number one for the first time, and when it became number one, right after it was released, was WSGN in Birmingham. Jim Tabor was the first one to play that record. And if I'm not mistaken, and I'd have to look this up, but I think, was that not produced by a very young Billy Sherrill?
I think it was.
I think
and you know that we perceive that today as a country tune, but it was not. It was a top 40 hit back in the day.
It sure was. And it was also 4 minutes and 19 seconds, which for that time was a long song.
That was the Stairway to Heaven before Stairway to Heaven.
One question that I have real quick, Rusty, you're known, especially in the New Orleans area and even on South Beach, of doing some picking and doing some singing yourself. Is that Ode to Billy Joe a hard song to do, and have you ever performed it?
I have not performed it myself, and it is particularly if you're going to sing it and play the guitar at the same time, because the rhythmic sensibility is a little different. So you have to have a certain rhythm to play the guitar, but a little bit different one for the vocal part. And not everybody can do that. Make your hands move independently of your mouth. So it's a relatively hard thing to play or to perform. Certainly, you could play. Most people could probably play the guitar part by themselves, or most reasonably accomplished guitarists. But putting it together with the vocals, that was something Bobby did very well.
The producers listed are Kelly Gordon and Bobby Paris, but it was arranged by a guy that won a bunch of Grammy Awards and Jimmy Haskell. That was a song within itself. I'm reading some history on it. It was 67 in July of 67. And she was born in Chickasaw County, Mississippi.
Right now, we're going to take a look at our last card, then we'll get into our photos of the day. This is from Louisville, Kentucky. May 28, 1981 is 4039. 4039, Louisville, May 28, 1981. Here's Rusty, then Michael, then Pat. Rusty, the card for May 26, 1981.
Yep, I've got that pulled up here. Louisville, May 28th of 81. And I had just graduated from college right before then, like a week or so before then. And it was about 2 weeks before I got married. So this was a very important time in my life. At any rate, so Chief Thundercloud versus Phantom. Was that a midget match? I don't remember for sure.
No, Chief Thundercloud was longtime tag team partners to Danny Little Bear. Big run with Thundercloud and Danny Little Bear in Memphis. Also for Nick's territory as well. The Phantom was Don Bass.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, I didn't know that. Okay, so the Nightmares versus Eddie Gilbert and Coco. I assume that's Coco Ware. The Nightmares were Ken Wayne and Danny Davis, as I recall. And they had 2 or 3 different gimmicks, I think. They were like the Galaxians and maybe something else too. Then Chick Donovan versus Ron Sexton. I always thought Chick Donovan was better than he got credit for, or he didn't get over as much as I thought he would have based on his talents and speaking ability and so forth. Then Onita and Fuchi, great Japanese team, versus I assume that's Plowboy Frazier and Dutch Mantell. That would be an interesting team, Plowboy and Dutch. Sullivan and Ferris versus Dundee and Dream. I assume that's the Dream Machine, and he was terrific. I always wondered why he didn't get or go more places than he did, because man, he could talk like nobody. He actually could talk about at the level that Jerry Lawler could. I mean, he was that good. Then a triple chance battle royal. And then finally, and this is an important one, a Texas death match with Jerry Lawler versus Terry Funk with Jimmy Hart. You know, Jerry Lawler and Terry Funk had a rivalry going, a feud going on for decades. until Terry Funk died, I bet. Anyway, this was, I don't know if this was before or after the empty Coliseum match that Lawler and Funk had. This was May of of 81. I think it was 1980 when they had the empty Coliseum match, but I might be wrong about that. Anyway, you could always count on a match with Jerry Lawler and Terry Funk to be entertaining because both of those guys were just so good. Another great card. That's all you can say.
A fantastic card. Who wants to go next, Pat or Michael?
Take it, Pat.
Well, I mean, top to bottom, that in my mind is an outstanding card. And Rusty pointed out a couple of things that I'd emphasize. There are a lot of people on here that are underrated, in my opinion. As you said, Rusty, Chick being one of them. The Nightmares, and Funk and Lawler. I mean, I'd pay to watch that once a week for the rest of my life. I mean, that was just, I guess after Dundee, Funk was probably my favorite opponent for Jerry. And, young Eddie Gilbert and Coco Ware and, the Nightmares, again, I think are just really, really underrated. A lot of good stuff here. A lot of good stuff.
I met Terry Funk years later when I lived in Amarillo, Texas, because he lived actually in Canyon, Texas, which is kind of next door to Amarillo. And we would see him every once in a while. Actually, one of his daughters worked as a hospice nurse with us at our cancer center. So we got to know him. And what a great guy. He was so calm and quiet, just the absolute opposite of his, in-ring personality. And I told him, I remember this, that my father and I had gone to see him versus Jerry Lawler, I don't know how many times. Oh, and he got a real kick out of that and gave me one of his books and personalized it. So I can't say enough good things about Terry Funk.
Yeah.
I'll agree with that. Randy, can you put that card back up there? Because I'll tell you what that card means to me. Louisville Garden Wrestling fans, this coming Tuesday night, a big card of action has been signed. 7 big matches on the card, including a Texas death match. Jerry the King Lawler. It'll all come to an end with Terry Funk managed by Jimmy Hart. A 19-man, 2-ring battle royal, triple chance rules. Plus, Roy Rogers gets his chance for revenge against Jimmy Hart. Bill Superstar Dundee and the Dream Machine against Kevin Sullivan and Wayne Ferris. Hart will be in their corner. Mr. Fuji and Onata with Tojo Yamamoto in action against Plowboy Frazier and Dutch Mantel. Chick Donovan against Ron Sexton. The Nightmares with Jimmy Hart take on Eddie Gilbert and Coco Beware. And Chief Thundercloud opens the action against the Phantom with Jimmy Hart. Tickets are on sale now at the Louisville Gardens. We'll see you at ringside Tuesday night. Be sure to watch Channel 3 for more breaking information on Championship Wrestling right here from the Louisville Gardens.
All right. That's it, man.
Did I do that
That's
in a
why
minute?
he is where he is.
If Randy West is watching, did I do that in a minute, Randy? Because all I can see in my head is Randy doing this and doing this and then doing this. So I hope I did it within a minute.
You did great. Fantastic. Fantastic card, and I appreciate. And now I have another job for you in the picture section of the show. And Michael, if you could open up your text, because I sent you a picture and I want you to make it a little bigger so you can read this article. This is a article from the Nashville paper in 1977, 1978, something like that. It's the first picture, I think it's 40343. 4043 is this newspaper article. And as we wait for Adam trying to find it, and I don't see that it's still there anymore. Hold on just a second. It went away. Michael, did you get the text?
I did, and I'm reading it.
There it is. There it is.
Yeah. Nashville wrestling promoter charged that a Hendersonville promoter paid 3 wrestlers not to make a series of appearances that he had arranged in Kentucky, Tennessee, and Alabama. The lawsuit was filed in Chancery Court. Nick Goulas owner of Goulas Wrestling Enterprises, alleged that Jerry Lawler, an employee of Jarrett Welch Enterprises, paid 3 wrestlers $200 not to make appearances Monday in Birmingham, Tuesday in Bowling Green, Wednesday in Nashville, Thursday in Louisville, last night in Huntsville, tonight in Pulaski, and tomorrow in Chattanooga. Goulas identified the wrestlers as Las Vegas Louie, Ron Garfield, and Don Fargo. Goulas sued the wrestlers and promoters Jarrett, Edward A. Welch, and Lawler for $1.5 million in damages. Wow. Ben Cantrell. Oh man. Okay. Judge Cantrell. Temporary restraining order from the wrestlers appearing for any promoter but him until the hearing can be held on June 12th. Goulas contends that the 3 wrestlers signed contracts with him April 12th, agreeing to wrestle in matches promoted exclusively by him. The wrestlers were reportedly out of town last night and could not be reached for comment. Interesting. I don't remember this particular episode, but I know, and excuse my French, there was a pissing match going on after Jerry had bought Nick out, and there was still bad blood from, Jerry, quote unquote, stealing Memphis or taking Memphis away from Nick back in 1977. And, and I think the most telltale of all this event is if we could ever show that clip of Robert Fuller interviewing Nick at his house.
Oh, that's great.
About how his part of the Welch Wrestling Enterprises was taken away from him, and just like it was from Nick. And then I'll never forget Jerry Jarrett watching that video and turning and saying, the funny part of that video was we got Robert to do it. Robert was working and Nick was shooting. And it was exactly the case.
Yeah, I remember that video also. That was great.
What year was that, Michael and Randy?
I want to say 80. Is that correct, Randy?
I was thinking earlier than that.
Well, I was working for Nick in 77, 78, and into 79. And, Jerry bought the territory and it all came down right after the first of the year of 78. And that's when he brought Dickie Steinborn in to help him with Nashville for about a cup of coffee. And it was very interesting because that was the only time I ever met Johnny Valentine. And having met Johnny, I'm sorry, not Johnny Valentine, Boogie Woogie Boy, Handsome Jimmy, Johnny Valiant. He brought Johnny Valiant into town, and having worked with Jimmy, and then all of a sudden I'm working with Johnny. And you talk about daylight and dark. I mean, in more ways than one. It was an odd time. But Nick, God rest his soul, it took him a long time to get over all that.
That came out in April of 1989. So I think that was after Nick had started to try to run some more matches and get stuff going.
No, that newspaper article was in the 70s for sure. This is because of the talent listed there, Don Fargo and different things. This is in the mid-70s for sure.
Okay.
I think it was late 70s, to be honest, Randy, but I think you're right. I think it's closer to then than the 80s for sure.
Okay.
I know Nick died in 91, and he was sick for a couple of years and was in the hospital for months out at Nashville, out at the county hospital in Nashville, of all places.
I was misquoting Adam. Adam popped up the 89. That was the interview with Ron Fuller and Nick about Jerry stealing the territory.
That's the one I recall.
Yeah, not the article, not the lawsuit here.
And by the way, you got a run-in going on with the cat there, Michael.
And then we'll just go.
Here's the reason.
What?
Michael had a run-in by his cat. There he is.
4052, and we'll go Pat, Michael, and William. These are just, let's get real quick. 4052, and I want to start with Pat because Pat was scared of this dude.
I'm scared of that guy today. Look at that guy. Dr. Ken Ramey, man, the most greasy, evil manager of all time. All time. And this is a later picture. When I knew him, he had that kind of greasy flat top look, and wore a white suit a lot. But oh yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Nobody
Dr.
was more
Ken Ramey.
just slimy looking,
Oh
like
yeah.
the
Oh yeah.
worst used car salesman you'd ever see. He'd stab you in the back in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Dr. Ken Ramey. I remember wearing a leisure suit, like a brown leisure suit that was horrendous on him. Well, horrendous on anybody, but particularly horrendous on him. So he played that part perfectly.
And I think they went out west and wrestled out there a lot too. Is on
They
the
did.
Pacific Northwest, and that may have been kind of their homestead. But I mean, it's just it's a period of time for me in the late '60s, early '70s when he was hot. He was hot in Birmingham.
Michael?
I think he took that picture right after he auditioned for the Dave Clark Five. It's an odd picture. It's Ken Ramey, but I'm like you, Pat. I remember Ken Ramey with the burr cut, with the flat top and the grease, and in the leisure suit, and this.
He passed away about 15 years ago, but I read the newspaper out there did a very pretty long, in-depth interview, and it was pretty interesting. I mean, he's obviously a bright guy.
He also worked at he and the interns worked at the Olympic in Los Angeles for several years. I guess it went back when Jose Lothario was promoting that area, and I forget the guy out of LA that was doing it was the quote unquote Nick Goulis or Jerry Jarrett of that area. That's him. He worked for them for several years as well, and made big money in LA at the Olympic.
I tell you what, if I could grow some burns like that, I would do it.
Try out for the Dave Clark Five.
Our next picture, and this is two guys, Lynn Rossi and Tojo Yamamoto. They're out in the streets of Nashville, Tennessee, collecting money. This is Lynn Rossi, Tojo Yamamoto, Rusty, Pat, and Michael. Quick takes.
So, Tojo's got his wooden shoes on there. That was one of his best gimmicks. He would wear them out and then put them on the edge of the ring when he'd get in the ring. And he had every dirty trick he could think of. He would call himself, sneaky Jap. But then he would do every dirty trick he could think of, including picking up the wooden shoes and whopping people over the head with the shoes, which I remember my dad saying, that could kill a guy. Oh, he was so mad at Tojo. And Tojo just played that part so well.
Pat?
Absolutely. Now, were they here collecting money for charity or something like that?
I think it was when Nick was having really bad.
Come on now. Come on now. Stop it. I mean, Rusty, you and I share similar memories of Tojo. I remember, and Tojo was perfect for his time, 15, 20 years after the war. And even though he was a decorated Marine fighting for the U.S., but he was, let me tell you something. My father was not the most open-minded of fellas, and I'll leave it there. And he certainly had no love for the no love for the Japanese, but I was watching that, and Tojo turned babyface and came in and saved somebody in Birmingham. And Tojo was so good, he got over with my dad.
Michael?
I think this picture was taken before Lynn Rossi had his wreck, actually. And one thing, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm pretty, Nick had a really soft place in his heart for the DAV, and I would give you $100 to a dime that they were taking up money for the DAV in this picture. But I always loved Tojo's fedora, and he would be so funny. There were several times that I rode down to Chattanooga, or drove him down to Chattanooga TV, and one time we stopped at the steakhouse in Manchester to eat, and Tojo was a heel then, and he said, "Mr. St. John, you go in first. I'll come in a minute." And I was okay. So I walked in, got a table or whatever, JoJo walks in, the door opens, it's JoJo. He goes, "Banzai!" And the whole restaurant. and I mean, that was JoJo. JoJo loved him, and there's a great video of him and Lawler about them running and doing the tricks, doing a locker room trick on JoJo, when they put the hot bomb in his pants. And but JoJo was a trickster too. He loved a good prank. He lived for a good prank.
Greg, you're right. I think Chick still is wrestling a little bit. But if you look at that picture, Adam, if you'll pop it up real quick, you can see the time period if you look at the cars behind them.
All right, I will find it.
See, those are some late '60s cars there.
Yeah. It's before Lynn had his accident for sure.
Yeah.
Very interesting thing, and I want to interrupt real quick because we mentioned it earlier. The talk, and I heard you guys commenting, and I certainly want to refute one thing. Certainly, there's plenty of reasons for a wrestler to not get released, but this, social media wise, is certainly one of the topics that's going viral over the internet in the last several days. That's why I'm getting feedback. Nothing to do. I'm having an audio problem today. R-Truth, Ron Killings, was born January the 19th, 1972. At age, he is 53 years old now. He debuted in March of 1997. He wrestled for the WWE early on in his career, wrestled as part of Memphis Championship Wrestling. Then he's been wrestling for the current WWE for 17 years, and this guy is a star. Listen to My World podcast, nothing but 100% positive stuff, because I can assure you people that there's been no drug issues, no arrests, nothing ever negative in the wrestling career of Ron Killings. Here's a guy, as a youth, did get in illegal problems, and what saved him was that he turned his life around by becoming a wrestler and becoming a star. And he's worked for that company nonstop for 17 years, about 23 or 4 in all. There's rumors that several of the wrestlers are threatening walkouts, and they've been vocal of the fact that he was released. WWE is a different cup of tea now. Remember Vince McMahon? You can say everything bad you want to say, but he took care of his guys. He took care of the guys that brought him to the dance. TKO don't give a shit. They don't give a shit. They probably think Ron Killings is an older guy that can't wrestle a full schedule, and he's probably making millions of dollars a year. And it's strictly a money situation to cut out that expense. No doubt in my mind, that's what it was, not knowing that the fans are going crazy, and so is the talent. To wrestle for WWE 17 straight years, this guy has a lot of charisma, a lot of personality. He's a great interview. He can have a serious wrestling match. He's athletic. And he also has a great sense of comedy, which is how they booked him there. So certainly, Ron Killings, R-Truth, gone from the WWE. We don't want to spend a lot of time on it. But Michael, now your comments, and I disagree with the comments that if there was anything bad. I think 100% corporate wrestling, currently running the wrestling business, not having a clue about who they have on their roster. They seem, as an older guy, They don't work a full-time schedule. That's why he lost his job. That's my opinion. Now, Michael St. John.
Well, and again, I didn't know the backstory. I didn't even know this had happened until we went on the show tonight. Ironically, Nick Khan, I did hear this earlier today, sold over $4 million in TKO stock today on the stock market. So perhaps Nick Khan starting to dump shares out of his portfolio with that. You know, what it also, I think, Randy, I think, and I will agree with your point, and we'll trace back on my comments, but the one thing I think that R-Truth was about was he was one of the last comic book characters that Vince McMahon developed in the WWE. He was one of the last comic characters, if you would, both with his comedy and his personality. He was along the lines of the characters from the late 80s and early 90s. And I think that might have something to do with it too. Whereas I think the TKO people and the guys that are involved now are more serious about characters and their wrestling personalities. Where Ron Truth was, one of the funniest things I ever saw, and just saw it the other day, was a interview he had about the Royal Rumble, and he was confronted by Brock Lesnar, and he gets in there and he says he is not going to be he is not going to be in the Royal Rumble if he has to be in there with Brock Lesnar, because he ain't going to go to Sioux Falls City. And it's just, his character was so well developed, but again, it was that comic book character kind of thing that the WWE has tossed aside now.
Absolutely. Quick comments, Pat.
Well, the way I'd like to kind of talk about it just for a second is, and I saw, and I couldn't find it on social media, but Dave Meltzer said that Raw had one of its lowest viewings it's had in years this last week or so. When they were purchased, it was a public company, but it wasn't a public company within a public company. And the two things. Number one, the quarterly numbers are critical. And if you can draw in wrestling, it's easy. You draw the people, you pay the boys, and everything else. And if you look at it, Brock Lesnar is still on the payroll. They've got probably more people on the payroll who hadn't been in a ring in 3 or 4 years than they do on the active roster. And but the catch-22 they're in as a company is there's nobody in another territory to come over. So the business from a financial standpoint, it being a public company, has changed, and the industry has changed. And I know of wrestlers who hadn't been in the ring in years who are still on the payroll, and it's just that they're living in a different world since they got acquired. I do hear that Vince is making rumblings about trying to buy it back, which would be interesting.
Yes, and I don't know if he could do that. Rusty, quick comments on that.
Yeah, I agree with Randy. I think that was probably TKO's call. But what that implies is that it's not under the control of Triple H anymore.
That's
So
right.
it's completely out of the McMahon, extended family.
Good point.
We've had issues of Adam has lost his power apparently. Now that last in the private chat, it says Randy Hill says I'm back. That's Adam typing that, so he can go back to produce in the last few minutes. I have, but that's interesting stuff, and we don't have a lot of time left in the show. Apologize for the technical issues we're having today. Adam, picture number 4054. 4054. This is on the set of Nashville TV. This is the Dirty Dutchman, ring announcer Jim Kent and Tom Renesto. Michael.
This was done at Channel 2 in the production studio at Channel 2, and this was probably around 1977, no, that earlier than that, 76. Jim Kent, again, a radio legend and the voice at one time, did voiceover work with the Grand Ole Opry, and but not a wrestling announcer. Also notice he's got a clipboard in his lap. This was after they took the table away, or no, this was before Nick put the table back in front of the wrestlers that they'd sit down at the table to do the interviews.
Had to get that Goulas NWA sign in there when for the table, because that was always there.
And you know who drew that?
No,
Saul Weingroff.
I'll be darned. But that was always there. Nick was really big on being in the NWA. You would see or hear at the end of almost every event, sanctioned by the NWA. And they didn't quit doing that until after Jerry Jarrett broke away from him. So Nick was really kind of proud of being an NWA member. If this was Dutch, I think he started in the early 70s, as I recall. And I've listened to his podcast, him talking about this. So he kind of moved around. So I guess, this must be like 76, 7, somewhere around there, maybe. That would be my guess.
I'm going to say 76, and they had a great run, and Ernesto booked it between him and Randy Savage. One-on-one, get in and just brawl, and people loved it.
Oh, I bet. And Dutch has all those great stories about Randy Savage, like the time he was in the Waffle House and got bitten by the police dog, and all these other great stories about how crazy Randy Savage was.
Pat, do you like this picture?
That's a young Dutch, and that is a sweet leisure suit that Tom Ernesto has on.
And Tom's hair is about as greasy or about as slimy as it gets too. Boy, that's really slick back.
Yeah.
Next picture, 40-55. Michael.
Well, that's if I'm not mistaken, that's Angelo and
Laney
Poffo. Yes, Angelo and Lanny together. The Poffos, a wrestling family that probably doesn't get the propers that they deserve either. Except, of course, Randy was a superstar, but Lanny was a star within himself, and Angelo Poffo was a brilliant man. Lanny Poffo had something I saw done. I saw him. He got a bet placed in some wrestlers in the wrestling in the dressing room, put down money on whether he could do a certain thing, and he could. And it was like, I can't believe this. But anyway, Lanny, we lost Lanny about this time last year, if I'm not mistaken. And Angelo was a brilliant guy.
I thought Lanny was a thoughtful guy,
Yeah,
really was.
And a good father and a good family man.
Could Angelo work?
Oh God, yeah. Oh, he was one of the originals. He came out of the Detroit area, and he also wrestled in the Northeast, Philadelphia, Washington, Capital Wrestling, in Boston, all through that area. And he was the professor, Angelo Poffo, and he would wear the cap and gown and would come out in a long robe that looked like a gown and the cap and the tassel and everything. And they would play Pomp and Circumstance. And,
Lanny picked that up.
Yeah. But he would ask when the announcer was cued to say when the Pomp and Circumstance would hit, the announcer would say, the Professor Angelo Poffo requests that the audience please stand for his entrance, and then they play the Pomp and Circumstance.
I've never seen a clip. I've never seen a clip of him working.
He's good. He was a great scientific wrestler, but bent the rules when he had to. Was a heel when he had to, but was a great, just a pure wrestler, if you would.
Next picture is 4056, and we'll start with you describing this great picture from the Mid-South Coliseum in Memphis, Tennessee. I love this interest shot right here, Rusty. Describe.
Oh, that's a great one. So in front is Sam Bass, I believe, and he's holding the crown. And then right behind him is Jerry Lawler, acknowledging, his royalty. And then behind him is the giant Plowboy Frazier from Philadelphia, Mississippi, who legitimately was the character that he played on TV. He was just a country bumpkin who they found, basically ran into, was my understanding, and they brought him up to TV. So that was great fun to see Lawler and Frazier together.
Pat?
Just, wish Sam Bass had spent another 40 years with us,
Michael?
Classic. That's all I'm going to say. That's just a classic picture. And Sam with that serious looking. Sam always had the blue jeans and the, either a flannel shirt or a Western style shirt. And notice how Lawler and Bass both have that same look with their facial hair.
Yeah, the goatee, the heel goatee. Yeah. Heels had the goatees. Ken Ramey too.
I hadn't thought of that, but that's true.
Ken Ramey had a goatee too. Yep.
Picture 4057. We'll start with Michael. 4057.
Whoa. Well, that looks like Jim Kent again. I'm trying to who's the wrestler?
Big Bad John.
Big Bad John. Oh, yeah. He had left Nick before I got there, and I never got to work with him. But there were stories going around about him. Apparently, he was a very entertaining guy in the locker room as well.
I remember seeing him I remember seeing him as Bicentennial Baby. But like Michael said, he never really came around Memphis very much after, much after 76, 77. So I didn't have a lot of exposure to him.
How about you, Pat? Big Bad John.
I looked him up a month or so ago, and he's a big guy and not necessarily ripped, but he could move. For his size, he could move.
Big guy, had charisma, no doubt about it. Final picture of the day on Talking Memphis Wrestling. Michael St. John, Dr. Robinson, Pat Trammell, and our final picture of the day is Tommy Gilbert, Nick Goulas, and Eddie Marlin. We'll go Pat, the doctor, then Mike.
The Gilberts and the Marlins in my mind hold a place in Memphis and the Goulas Welch territory that few people do. I mean, they're just, it's almost founding father like to me, because they were always, the babyface team of my youth with Nick.
Yeah, I remember that too. Actually, they would, also, you remember they would bring Tommy Marlin in, who I believe was Eddie's brother, and he would come in and like referee sometimes big matches back in the day. But I didn't know for sure whether he wrestled himself or not. I assume he probably did. But you would see him in Memphis as a referee, like for a world championship match. And also, I see that big NWA sign behind Tommy again. Never misses that.
It was a great treat for me when they brought in their cousin Johnny Marlin from England.
Yes, that looked a lot like Eddie Marlin.
They really did. Yeah. And he had
one thing, as we can lose that picture right now, Adam. One thing, Michael, I think is interesting, and you mentioned it earlier, but Nick Goulas, and Rusty mentioned too, Nick Goulas on every TV, he promoted and flaunted and bragged on the NWA more than any promoter in the NWA. And it was awful ironic that happened when the Jarrett Goulas split happened, Michael. The NWA members went with the opposition. Jerry Jarrett did not go with Nick Goulas. But we've seen in a few pictures today how Nick really loved the NWA.
We know back then, Randy, first of all, that last picture was from Channel 2 in Nashville, the same as the picture we saw before. And Nick with the slick back hair and the wide lapels, and Eddie in the plaid pants. And I can hear Nick saying, Wrestling Fans is coming Tuesday night at the Sportatorium or at the Hippodrome Arena in Nashville, Tennessee. We're going to have 5 great matches, and these 2 men are going to be up against Tojo Yamamoto and Mitsuhara. And Tommy, tell me what y'all have in store for that Japanese crew this week. I can just hear Nick just doing his rumble and no advance in prices. This is the biggest card I've ever signed for the Hippodrome Arena in Nashville, Tennessee. He'd do the whole thing. But if you notice, this is a shot from behind the camera because you notice how the backdrop cuts off just on the other side of Eddie's elbow. But talking about Nick and the NWA, you know, it's ironic. Back in the day, the NWA would have an annual convention meeting, normally in Vegas, sometimes in St. Louis, and all 28 promoters would get there and they'd have drinks and have dinner and they'd all be, it was a convention, but they would elect every year the president of the NWA. Now we know that the NWA was run by Sam Munchnick. And the history on Sam is he was a sports beat writer for the St. Louis Browns. The Browns moved to Baltimore. He didn't have anything to do. He started talking about writing a column about the weekly wrestling matches in St. Louis. And he basically blackmailed the promoter at the time in St. Louis and said, if I don't get a piece of the action, I'm going to write an expose that wrestling is fake or wrestling is predetermined. And it scared the daylights out of the promoter. The promoter gave him a piece of the action. Before you knew it, Sam Munchnick owned the St. Louis territory and then decided to do the same thing to all the other promoters of the territories. That's how the NWA was born. It wasn't a situation where let's all get together and work together. It was a situation is if we don't work together and let me be the leader, I'm going to expose you guys and put you out of business. And that's how the story went. But and it's true because Sam admitted it. He admitted it to me in person over lunch. But the fact of the matter is every year they would elect a new president. And at one time, and it might have been 76, Nick Goulas was elected the president. Bob Geigel at one time was the president. Bill Watts was the president at one time. I mean, they sort of, distributed it around the promoter.
Yeah, Fritz von Erich was
the president and so forth and so on. So Nick, like you said, was very loyal. But between that time and the time that Jerry Jarrett took over Memphis, what happened was, and it was all about Harley Race. Harley Race came into the territory, did a week, doing each town, doing a match in each town, went 60-minute Broadway with George Goulas in Nashville. You've heard the story before, I've told it before. But what happened was Nick shortchanged Harley Race on his per diem, on his. And that led to a problem. And Harley went back and told Sam, he said, I ain't never working for that whatever again, that Greek, whatever again. And that's what caused the rift between Sam Munchnick and Nick Goulas. And by the time Jerry took over, that rift was at its peak. So when Sam had a chance to do up to Nick Goulas, he did and took the champion and put him in the stall with Jerry Jarrett.
Hey, Pat Trammell, this show today. Again, I apologize for technical issues. What did you learn today on Talking Memphis Wrestling?
Well, I love what we're doing now because I learn about, people I did not know. They're not Lawler, Dundee. It's all those people who are kind of in and out of the territory through the decades. And it's very interesting to see kind of how they're matched up in cards and how cards are built. And again, one of I'll tell you something I really learned today. I look at that Robert Fuller card and I think I'd pay to go see that. But then I realized if you don't build to it on Saturday mornings, you don't get the people out. So it's not about putting a good card together. It's about telling a story that people want to see the denouement of.
William, what did you learn today?
Oh boy, lots of things about lots of different people, but I think my favorite thing was what Michael was just talking about with Sam Munchnick. I had not heard that story about the creation of the NWA and all the other promoters. So that was just fascinating. I mean, I knew Sam Munchnick was kind of the guru of the NWA and kind of called the shots, but I didn't realize he was so important to putting it together initially. So that's news to me and I think fascinating.
Real quick, William, what do you have coming up on the podcast? The Blue Doctors Recommends coming out tonight at midnight, hopefully.
Yes, it comes out at midnight tonight. We're going to do a discussion of the NCI's annual report on cancer. They do one every year, and it's got some interesting findings in this year's version of it. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit. We're going to talk about high strangeness in New Orleans again, and we're going to have some music thrown in too. So it should be fun.
All right, the Blues Doctor podcast. Michael, what did you learn today?
Well, I learned I can still do a 1 minute promo in 1 minute on a card from 1979. Also, Tony Richards, who I follow on Twitter, is the Kentucky Wrestling Memories, posted today that 40 years ago today, to this date, Jerry Lawler defeated Randy Savage for the NWA Southern Heavyweight Championship at the Mid-South Coliseum in front of 9,000 people. So that's ironic. 40 years ago. It seems like yesterday. But
no kidding.
I had a ball. I had a great show. Great putting this together, Randy. You put together another all-star show. I really appreciate the work you do in the background. And Adam, with the yeoman's work. I'm sorry you had technical difficulties. Hey, it happens to the best of us. So let's get that settled for next week, and we'll be back. I do want to add one thing. I will miss the show next week. I got an invitation today, and you guys are not going to believe this, but you know I'm a big baseball fan. I got a call from the marketing director of the Rocket City Trash Pandas, who, by the way, are playing the Birmingham Barons tonight in Birmingham down at Regent Park. But he asked me, next Tuesday night is Marshall County night with the Trash Pandas here against the Pensacola Blue Wahoos. And the folks at the Trash Pandas said, we got to get somebody from Marshall County everybody knows. And somebody said, why don't we get Michael St. John to throw out the first pitch?
All right.
Yeah,
Tuesday,
nice.
It's a 6:35 game start, so I might be able to make the second hour. I don't know if we'll stay for the whole game, but I'm allowed one guest to come with me onto the field. Any thoughts, guys?
Absolutely. I'll knock you in the head.
He loves it. He shows up to Pawpaw's house before I was off. I was a couple of minutes late coming on. He's upstairs. He's left since. He had his Rocket City Trash Pandas jersey all on already. He's ready to go out on the field with Pawpaw. So we'll have film of that, by the way. But
you better get warmed up.
hey, you and me both, Pat. I tried to throw a rock into the backyard a while ago, and I think I hit the neighbor's garage. So I got to really.
Thank you, guys. I've sent out a text to my nephew Cal, and he does my technical work for me. And I said, between now and next Tuesday, you got to come and make sure I have sound. If not, Adam's going to have to make the drive from Georgia to Jonesboro to fix my damn audio. Cal did it the last time, so hopefully he can, because this has been hard on my end. But I thank you guys for covering up. That's why I send notes, people. So it might not be a bad idea every week to print out your notes, because this would have, if it wouldn't have been for that, I would have just let y'all do the show. And because we know I've had feedback, and we've had a great audience today. PJ says, just enjoy listening to you guys talk. That's the heart and soul of this show, talking Memphis wrestling. And PJ, thank you very much for saying that. We had great feedback from our audience. Because of our issues, we didn't deal with that too much. We'll try to do better, because I'm important, Pat's important, Michael's important, William's important, Chris is important, but the heartbeat of this show is Team Hales and the people that watch this show, and we appreciate it very much. Also, the heartbeat of this show is Adam Dunn, who gets us on the air, and he's about to get us off the air. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Pat saying bye-bye, everybody.